Hello everybody. In this video we're gonna go back to something we did quite a while ago. We created a little login feature. Well, actually before that we created a sign up page, and then if a person signed up then they could log in, and we kind of left that hanging, but now I want to go and revisit that here. You should have a users.json file in your project folder, and yours will probably have different data in it than what you're seeing here. But let's just review real quick how this file gets created and updated. I'm going to run the app here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use NodeMon to do it. Whoops, there we go. Okay, I'll use NodeMon, and then I'm going to run app.js. That's our main application here. Okay, so it's running on port 8080. And then if I go here, this is something from our last video. If I refresh here, we created a sign up. And if I click on it, now this is super ugly. It needs a lot of cosmetic work, but we aren't really too concerned about that in this project. I'm going to go ahead and add myself. And then I'll just put in some email. And remember, we have validation working here, so we have to type in a valid email. And I'm just going to set the password to something not very strong, like test. And then I'm going to go ahead and sign up. Okay, let's see what that does here. So it says, thank you for signing up. What that should do is populate this file with another user, and there it is. So there's the one that I just signed up with. All right, so we are storing our user data in a JSON file, or I guess you could call it a JSON database. In the real world, you wouldn't want to do this. You'd want to store your user information in a database, probably maybe a relational database or maybe a NoSQL database. We just did it here because we were learning about reading and writing to files, and it's an easy way for us to get started. But what I want to do in this video is talk about the password. So regardless of where you're storing your user data, you never ever want to store it in plain text. Okay, and the other thing I'm noticing that's just throwing me off here is it looks like we don't really need that confirm password property there. I should really leave that out. And so anyways, if you're seeing that, you don't need it. If you don't see it, then don't worry about it. I might have been fiddling around with it and playing with some things, but what we do need is a password property. Okay, now the password here should really be encrypted, and that's because in a business, maybe many people have access to the database, and you really don't want to be sharing your customers' information with everybody in your organization. We know that users tend to use the same password for different systems. So, an employee, maybe they get fired, they might, take everybody's password and start trying to use them to hack into other accounts that these users have. So it's really important for us to encrypt these passwords, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, real quick, I do want to go figure out why the confirm password is getting put in there. Now, when I was prepping for this video, I didn't see this on my other environment. So I'm just going to take a real quick look over here in app.js and see what's going on. So I'm going to the sign up confirmation. Oh, look at that. Well, let's see. So I'm trying to figure out. Okay. This shouldn't be here. When we call our add user function, now this is the function that's going to actually add the user to that JSON file. We don't want to include the password here. So if you have this like I do, we should probably get rid of that. I'm just going to test this just to make sure that it's working again. So, and by the way, if you want to find this bit of code, it's in the sign up confirmation route right here. And it's where we call the add user function that we imported from our user helper module. Okay, so I'm going to try this again. I'm going to save my changes. NodeMon will restart the app, and I'm going to try the sign up process again. So I'm going to hit the back button over here and then reload the page, and I'm just going to add a new user, Lou X, and then I'll do x@x.com, and I'll set the password to test, and I'll confirm that here, test, and then I'll sign up again. Okay, it says thank you for signing up. I'm going to go look over in my user's JSON file. Okay, there we go. Now when a user signs up, that confirm password property is not there. We wanted to get rid of that. Okay. By the way, one of the big disadvantages to a JSON database versus a relational database is that a relational database will enforce schema. That's what we say. So a relational database wouldn't allow you to put something like this into the table because it wouldn't allow a column like that. So, but a JSON database just allows you to add whatever object you set up, it will get sent. It'll get saved in your JSON database, depending on how you're working with it. Okay, now we can get started with encrypting these passwords. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave the data in this file right now, but since we're gonna start to encrypt the passwords, we'd basically wanna delete all these users because at the time they were created, we weren't encrypting the passwords. So anyways, we'll see if we need to do that down the road here. So I want you to right click on your samples folder here, and let's go ahead and create a new sample program, and we'll create a new file in the samples folder, and we can just call it bcrypt. Now bcrypt is an npm package that actually I'm going to call it bcrypt-sample.js. Okay, now I don't know if you've used this package called bcrypt, but we can install it, which we'll do in just a second here. And then we're just going to play around with it a little bit so that we get familiar with how it works. And then once we kind of understand how it works, we're going to work it into our app.js, our main program for this project. All right, so the first thing I need to do is install the bcrypt package. So what I'm going to do here is kill the terminal here, Control C. And then I want to do npm install bcrypt. Bcrypt, I have to spell it right. Okay, so that's going to give us the package. And then I'm just going to rearrange some things over here in my other monitor. So that's taking a little bit of time to install. Maybe I should pause the video while that's, okay, looks like it did it. And now we should be able to use it. So here in our bcrypt sample file, let's go ahead and import it with the require function. So I'm going to do it like this: const bcrypt equals require, and then there's the package that we're going to import here. And now what this is it's going to give us this is going to be an object. So when we import it, it gets imported as an object that has a few methods that we can use to encrypt passwords. And then there's another method that we can use to compare two strings to see if the first one is the same as the encrypted one. It's a little bit confusing, but just follow along with me. And we're going to have to set up a few variables here. So right down here, I'm going to put a note that says encrypting. You know what? I guess encrypting is not really the right word to use. What we're really doing is hashing the passwords. Now, if you read the articles that I assigned to you for this assignment, you'll know that encrypting means that you can scramble up some text and then you can reverse that scrambling and get it back to its original form. Hashing is different. Once you hash a string, there's no way, theoretically, there's no way that it can ever be turned back into the original string. So I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to it here. But first, what we want to do is hash a password so that when you look at it, you can't tell what the original was. So in the comment here, I'm just going to make it say hash a password. All right, so now let's go ahead and just create a string like this, const, and we'll call it plain text password. So here's the password, and I'm going to just use something very simple. Obviously, you want your passwords to be a little more secure than this one, but that's going to be the password that we want to hash. Okay, and now in order to use the bcrypt package, there is another variable that we want to create. Now, we can talk about this in class, but you want to do what's called salting your passwords, and that just makes them more secure. If you read the articles that I gave you, it talks about how you can salt a password before you hash it. And I think the article, it's a little more clear, at least in my mind, how that works. With the bcrypt package, it's kind of strange to me how it works. But with the bcrypt package, what you have to pass in is what's called a salt rounds parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and declare a variable called salt rounds, and I'm going to set it equal to 10. So I think what this does is it applies some salt like 10 times or something like that. The more salt you apply, the more secure your hashed password is going to be. The harder it's going to be to figure out what it is for a hacker. Okay, anyways, let's kind of ignore that right now. We can talk about salting in class. And let's go ahead and use the bcrypt package now. So here, there's a few different ways we can use this. I'm just going to show you the async version, which is kind of the old way of doing things. So I'm just going to put a comment here that says async version. Now, what we can do here is we can take that bcrypt object and we can call the hash method. Okay. Now, there's a few parameters that we want to pass in. First, we want to pass in the password that we want to hash. That's our plain text password variable. And then we have to pass in, the salt rounds, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in our salt rounds variable like that. And then now this is an async function. So the last thing that we pass in is the callback. So here for the third parameter, I'm going to go ahead and add an arrow function for my callback. And the way this works is, now, if you remember way back from when we first started talking about asynchronous programming in Node, the way it works is you have what's called, for your callback, you're supposed to add the, the error first callback or something like that, where if there's an error, it will get passed in as the first parameter, like that. Okay, so I'm going to add a parameter for if there's an error that occurs. The second parameter that will be passed into our callback is going to be the hashed password, which is what we want. So I'm going to name that variable hashed password. Okay, and then I'm going to just make some more space here like that. Okay, so there's what we're passing into the hash method. A plain text password to be hashed. We have to salt it to make it more secure. And then here is our callback function. Okay, I'm going to split the curly braces apart for that. And then when you're doing the callbacks with asynchronous programming old school like this, what you want to do first is check to see if the error parameter is truthy or not. So what we would do here is we'd go if error, and then we might console log the error. So I guess that's what I'll do here. Console log err, like that. Okay, but otherwise, what we would do, so I'm going to make this into an if else, is we could console log the hash password. So here I'm going to console log the hashed password like that. All right, now I think we can go ahead and run this and see what happens here. So I'm going to save that, and then down in the terminal here, I'm going to, I guess I'll use nodemon. So I'll type in nodemon and then samples, and then bcrypt, there we go. Okay, all right, so there you go. There is the hashed password, and obviously you can't tell what the original was. Okay, now before I get into how we can use this to authenticate users, I want to show you that there's the bcrypt package is pretty cool because you can use it async style, but it also returns a promise, so you can use then and catch with it. So let's go ahead and comment out our original, example and do it using then and catch. Okay, so there we go. I'm just going to comment out our code right here like that, and I'm going to rewrite it using then and catch. All right, so the way this looks is like this. Let's first put a comment here, and I'll just say then catch. Okay, and we can do it like this. So hopefully you guys are starting to get comfortable working with promises. We can take our bcrypt object and call the hash method like we did before. This time we're only going to pass in 2 parameters. We don't need a callback because we're not doing the async approach anymore, but instead we'll chain on then and catch. So here the first parameter is going to be the plain text password. The second parameter is going to be our salt rounds. I don't need a callback because we're not using async style programming here, but what I can do is method chain on a call to then. And then I like to set the table up like this. I'll fill in the parameter to then in a second, but then I just put the catch there if I want to. I guess the catch isn't required, but it's a good idea to do it. And then that sets up that line. Now, people format code like this with all the method chaining a little bit differently. There's not like a standard way of formatting your code. I'm going to put a semicolon there. Here's the way I like to do it. I like to for the first then, I put it right there on the next line and indent it. And then for the catch, or if I had another then, I would put it on the next line and indent it like that. That's the way I like to format these promises, but you might be different. Okay, I'm going to fill in the callback for the catch right here. So that's an arrow function. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And actually, so that's going to give us an error object. And I'll just console log it like that. Okay, now I can abbreviate this if I want, because there's one and only one parameter here. I can remove the parentheses, and because there's only one statement inside the body of the arrow function here, I can remove the curly braces. That's up to you if you want to do that. Okay, so that's what's going to happen if there's an error hashing this password. Okay, let's talk about the callback that we're going to pass in for the then. All right, so here it's going to give us the hashed password. So what I'll do is I'll declare a parameter hashed password, and then this is my abbreviated arrow function, and I'll just go ahead and console log the hashed password. All right. So I think that should do it. So this is pretty cool because bcrypt allows you to, it returns a promise, so we can use then and catch with it. Let's see what happens when I run this here. I'm going to save this, and then I reran my app here, and let's see what happened. There we go. Looks like it's still working just like it did before, only this time we used then and catch. Okay. Now you could also use async and await, but I'm going to wait till we actually apply this to our app.js file over here. When you try to use async and await at a top level like this, it gets to be a little bit messy. So I think it's going to be easier if I show you async and await when it's actually used in when it's applied into our real app here. All right, so when our users sign up, we will hash their password when they submit the sign up form. Now for the login, the way that we need to deal with it is they're going to enter their password and then submit the form. We're going to take their password and we need to compare it to the hash to see if they match. So bcrypt has a compare function that we can use to see if a piece of plain text matches a hash. Okay. So what it'll do underneath the hood is it will actually apply the same hashing that we're doing here, and then compare its hash versus a hash that we give it. I'll show you what I mean here. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to need our password here, our hashed password. So what I'm going to do, let's put a comment here that says checking a password to see if it matches a hash. Okay, so what we'll do here is I'm going to declare a variable called hashed password. Now I can do that. We've got a parameter with the same name, but that's in a different scope. So this is a different variable here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that equal to a string, and I'm just going to go ahead and take that from the console right there. So there's the hashed password. Make sure you get it all, but not too much. So I'm careful in how I copy that, and I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, so what we would do when a user logs in, this is what we store in our database. And so when a user enters their password, we need to compare it to this and see if the hashed version of what they entered matches the hashed password that we have in our database. If they're the same, then we say the user has authenticated and they can get into the system. Now there is actually, we can use the async version like we did, and then we can also use a then catch like we did when we were hashing. I think I'm gonna, to keep the video short, I'm just gonna skip right to the then catch. Hopefully, I mean, you could figure it out if you needed to use the async version. I don't know if anybody's using those anymore. Everybody uses promises now. So let's go ahead and just do that. All right, so what we can do is take our bcrypt object and we can call a method called compare. Okay, and then what we can pass in is the plain text password. So that's going to be like the password that they entered into the login form. And what we want to do is compare that to the hashed password that's in our database. So the second parameter that I'm going to pass in here is the hashed password. Now this is going to return a promise, so I'm going to chain on then. Whoops, I need a dot, not a comma. And I'm also going to chain on my catch, and then I'm going to set the table here and format it like I do. So I like to put the then on its own line, put the catch on its own line, and by the way, I indented them. I think you saw that earlier. For the catch, we'll do the same thing that we did up above. We'll just console log any error that occurs. So I'll go error like that, and then console log error like so. Okay, and then here what we're going to get, we're going to get a result. The result is going to be true or false. So that's what compare returns. It actually returns a promise. But if the promise resolves, it's going to resolve to true. So it's a Boolean. So here, I don't know what to call it. I'll just call it result. But that's going to be the parameter that we add to the callback here. And then I'll go ahead and I guess what we can console log here is the passwords match. Okay, all right, so I think we can try this out right now. Yes, so when you want to compare a plain text password to the hashed version of it that you're storing in the database, you can use the compare method like this. If they're the same, it returns true. If they're different, it will return false. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. See what happens when it runs down here. It says passwords match, so that's pretty cool. Okay, let me see what happens if they don't match. I'm just going to go ahead and do the wrong password. You know what? This doesn't make sense. Regardless of what the result is, it's going to log passwords match. You guys, I got to stay on my toes here. Let's change this. Let's make this look like this. Let's go if result, then I'm going to use the conditional operator here, or the ternary operator. They don't match. Okay, all right, so hopefully you can understand that code here, but I'm just using the conditional operator, or some people call it the ternary operator. So basically what it's saying is if the result is true, the passwords match. If the result is false, then they don't match. Okay, so I'm going to run that again, see what happens here. I'm going to scroll down here. Oh, and by the way, this is really interesting. So look at the passwords match actually console logged before our our first our hash method resolved. Is it okay? So that's very interesting. So this is asynchronous programming right here. What that tells me is that it takes longer to hash a password than it does to compare passwords. Okay, so that's very interesting. So here's an example of asynchronous programming: is that we start to hash the password here, and then our program continues while we're hashing the password, and it runs into this code, and then it tries to compare, our plain text to our hashed password variable here, and this code completes before this one does, and that's why we're seeing the log appear in the order that it does. So very interesting. Okay, and kind of confusing too. Anyways, let's see what happens if the passwords don't match. I'm just going to go ahead and concatenate something here so that they don't match. I'm just going to concatenate an X onto that parameter right there. I'll save it, rerun it again, and it says they don't match. Okay, so we're going to use these two methods in our login right now. This video is getting long. I'll try and make it quick here, and maybe I'll try and do some things to speed it up, like copy and paste code. All right, let me pause it just for a second and regroup, and then we'll finish this off by applying the hashing passwords to our login. I should probably just remove this. I'm going to do that first. So there we go. Okay. Okay, so I've switched over to app.js, our main app for this project, and I'm looking at the sign up confirmation route here. So you want to scroll down to that. And let's see. So this is a lot of stuff we haven't talked about in a long time here, but here's where we're importing the add user function from our user helpers module. That's the function that we call when we want to add a user to our JSON database or our JSON file. Here we're taking what got submitted in the form that gets sent to us in the request body. So we're taking that and destructuring it and getting all the information that they entered into the form. Here we're doing some validation. So we're just making sure that they entered that we have values for each one of those. That would tell us that they actually entered values to all the inputs in the form. And then finally, we did want to make sure that the password matched what they entered for the confirm password. That's our last check for validation. And if everything is good there, we will go ahead and add the user by calling the add user function. And then we send a response that just says, thank you for signing up. Okay, so I think what we want to do is start right here now in this if statement. So let's go ahead and just comment this stuff out, the stuff that we have in there, like that. Okay, and I'm going to replace it. I'm just going to put a few extra lines here. So there's the if statement. I commented everything that's inside of that if statement, commented it out, and here's what I want you to replace it with here. So I'm just going to cut and paste it to save some time, like this. All right, a few gotchas with this, but here I'm going to paste it in like that. Okay, so this is what I pasted in, those lines. So I'm going to remove the selection and let you copy those in, and then I'm going to, before you try and run this, make sure you check with me because I have to tell you one more thing that you need to change here. But anyways, those are the lines that we're using now. Okay, as you're typing, I'll go ahead and explain it. So we're going to need the bcrypt package, so we require it. So that's where we're importing it. Okay, we're also going to need the salt rounds. That's what we talked about. So I'm declaring a variable for the salt rounds. Now here I'm using, instead of using then and catch, I'm using await. So we're going to call it returns a promise. You can use await before when you're dealing with a function or a method that returns a promise. That's when you can use the await keyword here. Now, because of that, I need to make sure that this function that includes this code is declared as async. Okay. Now, what that means is I'm going to go up to my function, which is my route handler, and declare it as async. Don't forget to do that. Where is that? That's right here. So here's my route handler. It's dealing with a promise, and we're using await. So what I can do here is declare it as async, just like that. So I just added async, the async keyword right before my route handler. All right, so I'm going to scroll back down and continue to talk about what's going on next. All right, so we've made this route handler function async, so I can use await here. So what that means is it's going to pause the execution of our code until the promise resolves. So it's going to wait and wait until the password gets hashed. Once it gets hashed, we'll have this variable here, and we can go ahead and use it when we add a user. Okay. Now, so here you can see that what we're doing here is we're adding this object to our JSON file. It's going to have a first name, a last name, an email, and a password. But now I did this here. I wanted to use the hash password, not the plain text password. Okay. And I am going to, my code that I pasted in here still had that confirm password. I think we need to get rid of that. So I'm just going to remove that confirm password. Okay, so that's going to add the new user, and then we're going to send out the response that says, thank you for signing up. All right, so that's everything here. Go ahead and save that. It's gonna, now we're no longer running our sample program. We want to run the app here. So I'm going to kill this down in the terminal with control C, sorry. All right, and now what I want to do is run our main app.js file. So I'm going to do node, I'll use nodemon, I guess, app.js. Okay, now let's see what happens when we sign up now. So I'm going to bounce back to the browser, and I'm going to hit the back button and then refresh it. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new user. I'll just add ku and v, and then I'll just do ku@ku.com. I'll set the password to something simple like test. Okay, and then I'll sign up. Okay, it looks like everything worked here. Let's go have a look at our database. So I'm going to bounce back to VS Code and check out the users.json file. Let's see what we have in there. Okay, it didn't get hashed here. What did I do wrong? Let me see what's going on here. So the first thing I'm going to do to troubleshoot this, and it looks like I had this in there from before, I'm just going to comment out that res send here, and then I'm going to remove the comments for the res send, and then I'm just going to go ahead and comment out those two lines, and let's just see what that shows us. So I'm going to go ahead, save that, hit the back button after restarting, and I'm going to do a sign up again. Okay, there is the hash password. I'm wondering why it didn't get put into the our users table. All right, maybe I just needed to try it again. I don't know if what I did wrong here. Let me reverse this here. I'm going to go back to how we had it. I'm going to comment out that line and then remove the comments for that line. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to save it and hit the back button over here. I'm going to hit sign up again. Okay, let's see here. There's always fumbling going on around here. All right, now it worked. So I don't know what I did wrong. You guys know there's a lot of weirdness and you just have to try things over and over again. But now it looks like it's working. The problem here is that our database isn't smart enough to know that we shouldn't have duplicate users with the same email. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to remove, you know what? I'm going to remove everything. Just going to do Control A and Control Z or Control, I'm going to cut it all out and start over again. So I'm just going to delete the whole file. And then I'm going to do one more sign up. So I'm going to hit the back button over here, So now the way we have our code set up is it will create the file if it's not already created, I hope. Let's see here. Didn't work. Didn't work. Oh, that's because I didn't start the server. Or wait, the server crashed. All right, so maybe I do unexpected end of JSON input. Oh, that's when we're reading it. All right, so my JSON file, all right, fumbling around. Let's do this. Let's make the JSON file start off as just an empty array. Boy, that's an issue that we might want to, I don't like that. So our JSON file is just going to be an empty array like that. Let's see what happens now. If I save it, hit the back button, hit sign up here. Okay, that looks like it worked. Boy, lots of fumbling, lots of fumbling. And if I look in the user's JSON file, it looks like it's working. Now all of our users who sign up are going to have an encrypted password. All right, this video is getting really long, but there is one more thing we need to do here. We need to go to the login page and adjust that a little bit. So here, I'm going to go to the login page and just look at what we have here. There's the login route, and here's where you enter your username and password and hit submit, and we send the username and password, and we need to compare that to the hashed version of the password. So whatever they type in here is going to be plain text. We need to compare that to the hash that we have for that user in our user JSON file. So that's what we're going to do now. All right, I'm talking fast because I don't like it when these videos get past a half an hour. Anyways, let's see here. So I'm going to go into app.js. I'm going to scroll down to our login. And we want to deal with the post requests. So that's the route we want, the one that's for handling post requests. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to try and make some more space so I can see what we have here. That's kind of a lot of code. All right, so that's the whole thing. Why don't we just comment out all of the code that's inside that route handler just to make things easy. So I'm going to comment out everything that's inside the route handler, which is that. So there we go. I just commented everything inside of our route handler, and we're going to replace it with this code here. I'm going to paste this code in little by little because it's kind of a lot. So here are the first few lines. Paste that right there. Okay, first of all, we need to import bcrypt. Now, since we're using this in multiple routes, we could just import it up above at the top where all of our other imports go. But here I'm trying to keep all of our code together and organized. But anyways, we're importing bcrypt. Now, we're no longer going to use our login function that we wrote before, because what we want to do is we want to get the user by the email address that they entered. So here we're importing, instead of importing the login function, we're importing get user by email. I'll show you how we use that in just a second. Now here we're destructuring the body object. So this is what the person entered into the form. And what I did here, so we're grabbing the email from what they entered in the form, and we're also grabbing the password that they entered. Now I'm aliasing this as password entered. Okay, I just wanted to do that so I don't get confused here, because we're going to have another variable called password that we'll see in a little bit here, but I want to refer to this one as the password that they entered. So this is a way that you can destructure and change the name of what you get when you destructure. So we want to destructure the password property out of this object, but we want to refer to it as password entered. So that's how you can do that. Okay, the next thing we want to do is this right here. We're going to go ahead and try to get the user that matches the email. So we'll do this const user equals get user by email, and we're going to pass in the email address that they entered. Okay, so that will give us the user that matches the email that was entered. And then we'll say, now there's a possibility that we don't have a user that matches that email. So I'm going to go ahead and do an if statement like this. split those curlies apart, and an else statement like this. And in this case, for the else, what I think I'll do is I'll do res.send, and I'll just make it say invalid email. Now, in the real world, what we might do is maybe redirect them back to the login page so they can try again. But right now, we'll just say invalid email. All right, so here for the main branch in our if statement, what we want to do is take the password that got entered and compare it to the password, the hashed password that we have in our database. So here is where I'm going to go ahead and use the compare function from the bcrypt module. So I'm going to go const result equals, and now that returns a promise, so I can use await, and then I'll type in bcrypt compare. And in this case, I want to take the password that was entered, and I want to compare that with the user.password that we have in the database. So that's going to be the password property of our user object. Okay, now I'm using await here, and that means that the function that encloses this, where we're using await, should be declared as async. So I'm going to scroll up here to my route handler and declare it as async, like that. And then I should be good to go. And now what we'll do is here, I'm going to put another if statement, and we want to say if the result is true, then the user has authenticated. So what we can do here is res.send, and we'll just make it say logged in. Okay, great, you're logged in. Okay, and I believe that's all we need to do here. Now, what we would normally do here is when a user logs in successfully, we would redirect them to some other page, but we'll worry about that in another lesson. Okay, so there's everything that you should have. Let's see, looks like that's everything that you're going to need for this. Let's try it out. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back over to the browser and refresh. I'm going to go to login. Ooh, let's see, what is the email? I need to look and see what I entered here. So the email is ku@ku.com, and then the password, I believe I used test. So, I wouldn't be able to tell by looking at this, but I think what I entered when I signed up was test. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this email right here. Go back to the browser and enter that, and I'm pretty sure I entered test. And then I'll log in, and it says logged in. Okay, now the browser is going to ask you if you want to save it. I'm just going to dismiss that. Okay, so that worked. Let's see what happens if I use the wrong password. I'll just type in some garbage. Okay, do we need to address that? What is it doing here? Oh, interesting. We didn't account for that, so we need to finish this here. So I'm just going to stop this. What did I do wrong here? Oh, all right. So I suppose if the result is true, we say they logged in. I'm going to add an else here that says an else. So I'll make that an if else, and we can say res.send and then say wrong password. Now you probably wouldn't want to mention this in the output, but I'll just do that for now, because then all right, so yeah, that should do it here. So I just turned that if statement into an if else statement, and I specified what to do if the password was not correct. Okay, save that. Let's try this again. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that that is something other than our real password. Okay, it says wrong password. All right, now I want to show you what happens if you try to enter an email that doesn't exist. So we don't have that email address in our database, our users file, and it doesn't even matter what I enter for the test. And in that case, it says invalid email. Now, you wouldn't want to show users this, because then they'd know they'd try some other email. And if they fumble around and they actually type in a valid email here. I'm going to go back to a valid email, and let's just type in, whoops, so that's a valid email, and I'll type in the wrong password. I'm just going to put some garbage in there. Okay, now here we're telling them that the password is wrong, but they might be clever and go, oh, okay, but I didn't see that the email doesn't exist. So then they would start to focus on this email address and start trying different passwords. So with these logins, you don't want to provide really any information like this. You might just want to say invalid login for everything. Okay, anyways, so hackers will look for these kind of clues to help them crack into your system. All right, gosh, this is the longest video I've ever made in my life, I think, but it's important stuff. Authentication and security is important. Now, in the next few lessons, we're going to talk about how you can deal with users who have been logged in. But there you go. This is how we can encrypt passwords and log in users based on encrypt passwords. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to go to sleep. All right, have a good one.